I will start with the introduction. So this was originally supposed to be a panel on gaming in alternative spaces, but of course we are now all gaming in the most traditional of spaces, our house. So now we're going to do a panel for you on gaming, on alternative gaming in the home. There's some really interesting things in gaming that are happening right now that would have happened anyway, and also that are happening in response to this global pandemic. So we'll talk a bit about that, and then we're also going to talk about where we see gaming going in the future because of this situation. And the panel we have today is incredible. I'm just really honored that you all decided to say yes and be on this with us. So everyone on this panel is from different parts of gaming and immersive and has really different perspectives on what we'll be talking about today. So we're going to start with introductions. I'm Ariel Rubin. I'm going to be the moderator, and I am one half of the Wild Optimists. And I will let my other half introduce herself and talk more about our company.
Great. I'm Juliana Patel. I am the other half of the Wild Optimists. And we are puzzle and game designers, and we do that across a wide variety of formats. So we have tabletop games that are out from Patel, the Escape Room in a Box series, and then we have other card games coming out and other tabletop games. But then we also design for music festivals, theme parks, historical sites, marketing campaigns, basically anything that we think can be improved and made more fun with games and puzzles and let the audience be the hero. That's what we want to make.
Awesome. I guess I'll go next. I'm Cara Mandel, and I am, well, my day job is I am the story experience producer for Meow Wolf, and my side passion hustle project is a company that my business partner Rachel Walker and I started called Interwoven Immersive. Creating experiential and gaming events for brands, parties, individuals, etc. And my side hobby is I am a complete escape room junkie and immersive nut, and I don't even want to tell you how many wins I have done, but it is a lot.
Great, I'll go next. My name is Giz Gewirtz. I am a video game designer and director. And a screenwriter, and I've been making various types of video games. More recently, I work for Niantic Studios, and I've been working on geolocation and AR games, and games that get you outside and involve real-world social interactions and exercise. All three things that are awesome to do right now.
I'm Noah Nelson. I run a website called Proscenium, which covers immersive and experiential art and entertainment. And we also have an event called the Here Summit and Festival, which is kind of an industry gathering for those of everything from escape rooms to immersive theater, virtual reality to theme parks. And it's a kind of a conclave of people who make that stuff, and increasingly a form of exhibiting some of the most experimental work in that space. Our focus tends to be on live stuff, and this current situation has been really interesting in terms of seeing how people are modifying. So we'll get into that.
My name is Tommy Honton. I am an experienced designer. I also happen to own an escape room in LA called Stash House. I specialize mainly in injecting interaction into narrative, which oftentimes is puzzle content and game design. But it's also ways to sort of gate content for non-puzzle people so that they don't know they're necessarily doing something that involves game theory or game design. So it's really fun to be able to get people that are a bit scared of solving something or interacting with something, luring them in and sort of training them how to play a space or engage in an environment without necessarily realizing they're even playing a game.
Awesome, thank you guys. And thank you so much for well, I would say coming to this panel, but none of us came here. We're all sitting in our homes. So let's start with this seismic shift that occurred. Can we kind of go around and just speak a little bit about what you were working on before and how it's changed because of the situation that we are in now?
Sure, so I'll start. Some of it has not changed at all. Like our tabletop design work continues apace as it always has. And some of it has shifted completely. So we had plans to work on a music festival and conventions and a live, historical site. And all of that has either completely gone away or been put on hold for now. But in the absence of that, other gaming opportunities have definitely come into play where we get to create things specific to this time period. And we can talk more about that in a bit.
Sure, yeah. And I'm excited to talk about that. I participated in something that you guys put on. It's wonderful. So I am currently located in Santa Fe. I'm working with Meow Wolf, and we very quickly switched to a work from home model. I can't speak to the specifics of what we're doing because I'm under HEFA NDA, and I'm very excited for you all to see it someday. But I can say that we are moving forward in a remote capacity and honoring every possible guideline in social distancing.
Yeah, good.
I came off of two projects that I've been working on for the past year. One was a very heavy tech project that was delayed a year, so that really has not really changed. But the other one was a live action sort of blue sky experience that was being tested for a company. And we were lucky that it ended when it did, because we were able to basically get the whole test done. Had it been a week later, we would not have been able to do the thing we worked on for a year. So it was really fortuitous timing. And that ultimately means that project will not probably see the light of day for some time. So the stuff that I'm working on that is years out is probably going to move on unaffected. But this idea of working on stuff now, it's everything that is still slated to open sometime next year is, to me, still all up in the air design-wise, because we don't know how things are going to shake out right now. And working on or trying to pick one way to go or the other, not knowing regulations, economics of what's going to play out, to me, I'd rather put things on ice design-wise and design when we actually have some certainty.
For us, I think there's been two sides of it. On the content side, we've definitely taken a look at other ways and the features that we can build in that are play from home, and ways for you to still experience the kind of games we make, but what they play from home, or still involving some kind of social aspects, but alter them slightly. From the actual production side, I've actually been pleasantly surprised at how quickly the team in the studio adapted to the work from home approach. And besides the occasional hiccup, it's actually been pretty smooth. And in a lot of ways, there's been these inspirational kind of breakthroughs and more creative tactics that we've been able to use. In some ways, we've been more efficient.
Just in terms of the main thing that happened with us, we were 10 days out from our big annual event when everything started to shut down. So that was a blow financially, psychologically. You spend all year working on something and then you're told you can't do it. And so that'll come back around, but like just figuring out how to try and do some of this stuff in terms of gathering community. But also the big thing we were looking forward to was exhibiting work. And there was a lot of most of it was live. So now the entire immersive experiential community on the live side of things, the digital side's a little different. I mean, I think we talk about the VR stuff, because VR is having this moment right now because everyone's stuck inside. But on the live side, everyone trying to figure out, well, how do we translate these experiences we create, these relationships we engender between the creators and the participants, using tools that we're either not used to using or that have really limited bandwidth when you're used to using all of your senses: sight, smell, touch, taste. And at this point, you're pretty much limited to this.
And so let's talk a little bit more about that. And I think this time we're going to start with Noah, because I want to hear, I think you have a better overview of the situation. So what non-traditional gaming, in Noah's case, are you seeing, and in everyone else's case, are you playing and working on, or just really excited about that is happening? This horrible thing has happened, but I think there is actually a lot that is exciting going on. So let's talk about that. And Noah, why don't you go ahead and start?
Yeah, well, one of the things we did pretty quickly with our publication is, we've got newsletters that cover, the country as a whole and also focus on New York and LA. New York and LA as coverage areas, just basically shut down overnight. And we pivoted to focusing on the stuff that we used to just call remote shows. So if someone had done a Skype show or a Zoom show, and there were some performers in our community who were already doing that stuff, they were working out of their bedrooms, using Zoom, creating these like one-on-one experiences. And some of those folks just like slid right into doing new ones or bringing old ones back. But then suddenly there was all this other stuff. There were people who were making pod plays. So a podcast that is an audio play, but then adding a level of physical interactivity by basically giving people a recipe to follow. Suddenly you had folks who were taking escape room elements and or taking an escape room and like putting them on camera, or we were finding people who are already doing stuff like that. There's folks who have like a Patreon where like they release a new one every couple of weeks. And there was just this kind of other world seemingly ready to happen. And there were always parts of our world that sort of center around alternate reality games and experiences that are starting to make a bit of a comeback. They're coming back alive. Those just happen to take a lot of effort on the part of creators. And that's been something, I mean, everyone's really just energetically low right now. So people diving in and doing something big and complicated has been a bit daunting. But we're at on week 90 now? So I think by the time this airs, week 164, my dog will go to college. I don't even have a dog yet. That's how far in the future we're going to be. That's my piece. No, does that answer does that cover the heart?
Yeah, I think that's a great overview. So let's go into specifics. Cara, do you want to? I know you can't talk about anything specific with Meow Wolf, but with either of your other side projects or anything that you can say or that you've played, what are you seeing that is exciting in response to the pandemic?
Absolutely, I have plenty that I can talk about. Don't worry. What if I just came onto this panel and I was like, sorry, can't talk about anything, NDA, bye. No. I very quickly, actually Noah was one of the first people to inspire me. I had been immediately hunting for ways to play escape rooms, get our escape room fix virtually. And it just seemed like overnight people just started cropping up with all these different opportunities. So I started kind of compiling a Facebook post originally. And Noah was like, you need to make this into a spreadsheet because you always make a spreadsheet out of everything.
I knew she was going to make a spreadsheet, so yeah. I just asked for it early.
Yeah, somebody recently called me the queen of spreadsheets or something like that, but it was like they'd never met somebody who spreadsheets for their social life in addition to their work. So I made a spreadsheet and contributed it for Noah's Indoor Kids article. And that thing started getting really popular and a lot of people started contributing and I just had a thing where I said at the bottom, put a comment in, and I'm sure we can probably link to it, but if not, it's tinyurl.com/indoorkidsguide. And it's just a list. It's a growing list that definitely needs some cleanup of like remote experiences, escape room games, puzzle hunts, and even some like streaming options and immersive things. But then I started kind of teaming up on this thing that roomescapeartist.com is doing. They're doing these things called Hive Mind reviews, and they're basically just a gathering of us who have definitely done our share of escape rooms. We're beta testing things, we're play testing things, and then we're just giving feedback and letting you know like what worked for us, what didn't work for us, just so you can kind of weed through it because there's an abundance of options right now. But yeah, I can talk to more specifics on that later if you want.
Actually, I would be curious just quickly, like what would you say is the biggest thing that's working and not working, just as overall that you're seeing?
Tommy actually witnessed something that I didn't enjoy as much, but I'm not going to get into specifics on companies. So what I will say is what has been working for me was anything that was thoughtfully designed with digital interactivity in mind, either a puzzle hunt or an escape room with website mechanics that you have to click through, point and click style, choose your own adventure type gaming. I've seen a couple interesting puzzle hunts created on the, what's it called, the Clue Keeper app. I have seen interesting and varying degrees of live stream events, some that worked and some that did not. I've seen people using combinations of live stream and pre-recorded video clips to simulate a live escape experience, which I think could work, but the ones I've experienced didn't work for me. I will say one of my favorite things that I've done thus far, and I am going to name check this company. I'm going to name check 2 companies, and this is not meant to be sucking up, but Vampire Pizza was an amazing experience, and it was like perfectly timed for the current state of things. I was able to zoom in with my LA friends who were experiencing it locally, which I don't know if that was breaking the rules, but I did it. And then the other thing that I've been loving is UEscape, which was the Patreon thing that Noah had mentioned. UEscape has been creating virtual escape rooms with a live host on camera, and they're appointment based, and it's a flat fee per team. And I'm just like, yeah, that's a great model. I mean, it's tough on the game master's part, but I think they're expanding their hosts. So yeah, lots of good stuff out there right now.
And UEscape isn't even that expensive, right? Like
$30 a month if you want the premium tier. I feel like I should work for them. I've been preaching about them for like the last month. So good job, Nick.
And Tommy, so it sounds like you're doing a bunch of these experiences too. And I know you're always working on like 20 billion things. So what have you been seeing, and what are you working on that you can talk about that is exciting within this current world situation?
I think the problem that I'm seeing is that while this is a fun diversion, I'm not seeing anything that really justifies itself as being anything more than a diversion. Not to knock anyone, I think it's still in the first generation of the space where people are learning the rules and the ingredients that they have to play with. And I think the biggest problem that I've seen is people trying to replicate what makes an in-person live action experience work in this space, which does not work. It is the equivalent of using one set of ingredients and trying to make the same recipe with a different set of ingredients. And they may look the same. Salt looks a lot like sugar, but making cookies with salt turns out differently than you expect. And so I think the real challenge is people learning what you can do to replicate the feels you get from live action, but in a completely different way. So even the nature of how people relate to a camera, or how angles of a space and playing with expectation, surprise, narrative, there are so many different formats and mediums to play with online, and I've seen people very lightly scratch the surface. And it excites me because in this period we're living in, people are iterating so quickly and so much. My hope is they're going to actually discover the tools that really work in this space and leave behind the ones that don't. Because just translating something, to belabor more analogies, is the equivalent, again, of sticking a really great novel through Google Translate and calling it the same thing. And you get the gist of it, but it's not the same thing. So my hope is that people are learning, and, I'm optimistic for that. As far as me, like, I have yet to be inspired by jumping in, because for investing, long term in this space doesn't necessarily make sense to me. Making a whole pivot with what I do business-wise into a space where I'm investing money and time into something permanent, to me doesn't make sense yet. And it's one, I'm not great at it. I don't know the tools, and I would want to play with it for a long time. And are people still, long after this is over, because at some point this is going to end, are people still going to crave connections over a screen? I'm sure remote stuff is still going to work, but are people going to crave this? And so that's a question I don't know the answer to.
Or are people going to be traumatized by this whole thing and not want, the last thing they're ever going to want to do is to be on a multi-screen conversation?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Although I think that in some ways it does open the door where, I never thought, let me have a happy hour with my friends all over the country, or with my family scattered all over the country. And because that's becoming a thing that I'm doing now, it is opening the door where I think even once this is all over, we will still be like, that was great that everyone who's scattered all over the world could spend time together. Let's take some time to do that.
It's interesting you should mention that because there's a VR company called Adventure Lab, which was started by folks who had been at Pixar and been at Oculus. And they've been working, for a while now on a piece they call Dr. Crumb's School for Disobedient Pets. And it's essentially, it's a 4-person escape room in VR, which they were setting up to be like an escape room, something you bought a ticket for, and for you and 3 of your friends could play. You would buy a session. There's a live actor driving characters in the space, but it's also set up like an escape room. And when they originally envisioned it, they thought, oh, this will be great for the people who have friends who are all across the country and never get to play together anymore. And now they're accelerating when they're bringing it out to market, because suddenly people are across town and can't go to a game with their friends anymore. And so I think something like that, which was already in process, already being baked, is going to survive this raw now that we're in. That's not mine. Someone said that. I thought it was really good. Like, this is not the new normal. This is the raw now, is what someone said today. And I was like, oh, that's a great way to think about it, right? Like, everything's raw. I think the weird thing is when people expect things to be polished and good, and that can happen if people are charging the kind of money for something that would be polished and good. And how people are setting expectations is a big thing.
I will say that is the one comment that I would have for anybody who is endeavoring to create a remote immersive experience right now, is to consider the price point. I mean, one of the things you have to take into consideration is that a lot of people are out of work right now. A lot of people have a breadth of options from which to choose, and they may not want to spend a higher price point right now. So just when taking that into consideration, like, value is a much higher consideration than it used to be.
So as we're, I think the topic of screens and how much are people going to want to be on screens after we've been just inundated. Giz, why don't you talk about what are the conversations that are happening around that with your work, both in terms of, what you guys are doing right now while everyone is on their screens, and I guess we'll get to the future in a minute, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's been just a shift on what it means to be social. Because again, you can play a lot of our games still and still be social and engage while still practicing social distancing and stuff, while still engaging and asynchronously. So I think it's just shifted a little bit. It's been fun because a lot of the games that I've been working on more recently have been more about getting out into the world and exploring. And so just kind of splitting the difference between finding ways to still be social and still have a shared experience, but in this altered world has been the most interesting thing. And finding that, one of the things that's really fun about the games we make is that you have a real memory, like an immersive experience where you're physically at a location when you're experiencing and playing our games. And so you can kind of still do that because you're still kind of allowed to walk around and go out. And I think as the restrictions start being lifted in waves, I think there's going to be a real desire and eagerness to get back and to get to those experiences. And I think that, some people are going to approach it a little more cautiously and some people are going to jump right in. But I think it's given us a lot of appreciation for how amazing these experiences were. And I think there's going to be a little bit of a cautiousness and kind of an eagerness to get back into these kind of moments.
Yeah, I certainly would like to start walking about more. Juliana, why don't you talk about what we've been doing? And Cara, thank you for calling some of it out earlier. I appreciate that.
Yes, thank you for that. So Vampire Pizza is something that we designed in conjunction with Rabble Rewound. And it was created specifically for people stuck at home in quarantine. And how do we bring kind of the fun and magic of a themed restaurant or an interactive experience straight into people's homes? So it's been great because it actually, it teams up to help support small local businesses, local pizza places, and then get this out into the world. A vampire literally comes dressed as a vampire in character, does a contactless delivery, and you get your pizza and your salad and your dessert, but you also get a game. It's an invitation to join the vampire revolution, and you have to solve puzzles and start to build a character and discover the narrative. And the thing that has brought me so much joy with that is just seeing the reaction online of people saying, you know, this was the most fun night in quarantine. And just, that's what I love so much about gaming, that it can bring so much joy to people in the midst of whatever's happening in the world. So anything that can really kind of brighten people's day and nights at this moment is just fantastic.
And we can't get into specifics, but we should also say something that's been interesting to us is we have been approached by companies who were going to do something in person or interactive or like an activation, and now of course have to reach press and influencers at home. So we've been working on a few projects recently that are trying to bring an immersive or gaming experience to get people invested in a brand at their house, and that's been a lot of fun. I think that's been something where, you know, we lost a lot of work because all these events canceled, and then we've gotten some back because events canceled and people need something that's at home. So
actually, I got a follow-up question on that, because that's of interest to me, even just intellectually. Do you think that is something that could survive this raw moment we're in? Because that shift, right? I mean, something that seems to have happened instantly was, you know, the Instagram influencer market collapsed like overnight, because suddenly there was no one, they couldn't go to somewhere cool and look hipper than everybody else, right? So like that's gone, right? Like turns out when they're at home, they're boring. And there's all this other stuff going on with journalism, right? Where like, you know, there's like waves of journalists like being laid off, and that pool of people that brands might reach out to who are influencers kind of starts to shrink. Is there a chance here for a sea change for, you know, the kind of folks who are watching right now might be able to like get some of this stuff at home in the long run and not just have to be the chosen ones or lucky enough to be at con?
I think it really opens the door to creativity, and I would hope to more of like a bit more of a meritocracy, and not just that I can afford to, you know, go to all these fancy places and take all these wonderful pictures, but hey, I came up with this really funny meme, or I cut together this cool thing. And so people who are using their creativity, where even when they're stuck at home, they can still make something that's relevant and interesting. And hopefully that's kind of who rises up to be the new influencer class.
Yeah, I have to say, I have been really inspired by the level of creative innovation that has sprung up out of this quarantine, like really inspired, to the point where I'm like, I feel unproductive, even though I'm working full time and doing a million things, but I'm like, I should be creating more. I should be, you know, we should be creating an immersive experience or a game. And it's really kind of heartening, because I feel like creators gonna create, you know, and people are just finding new mediums and figuring it out. So keep doing that, guys.
I think the other interesting thing is, I mean, I know like for us, like I'm stuck at home. I've been stuck at home with the entire family, and you know, jigsaw puzzles are really hard to come by these days. We've been forced to play every single board game that we have as a family, and I wonder if one of the repercussions of this is more of those kind of like the stuff that you guys do, more of those at-home experiences with a small group, where you are getting a group of friends. You know, the murder mysteries, where you're getting a group of friends, and you're not necessarily going out to have an interactive experience, but you're staying at home and gathering in smaller groups. To have more of those kind of experiences, because people have gotten more used to that.
I'm gonna throw a self plug at Noah/me. We created an article specifically because our friend group was trying to figure out how to do these escape room in a box games remotely. And if you check out noproscenium.com, there is an article that shows you how to use a second screen on a Zoom call as a tabletop angle. So do that.
But I will say too, I think we're in the raw now right now, but this is going to have a long tail. And even when, you know, okay, things are starting to open up, I think there is going to be a really large shift for a long time to at-home gatherings. So maybe it's not going to just be limited to you and your family, but maybe now you can get together with 4 or 6 other friends, but you'll do it at home. And you guys have already laid the groundwork for saying, hey, we know we enjoy playing these games together, so let's do this at home. So I think as people have kind of forced to be, you know, plunged into these at-home experiences, I think that a lot of them will continue well after this present moment.
I think something else, if it can get dialed in and really good, that will continue, is getting to play escape rooms and see experiences that you would never have been able to see because they're happening on the other side of the country or the other side of the world. And you know, it's funny, we're all stuck in our houses and the world has become so much smaller in real life, but so much larger virtually. And I think it's really exciting that I can play a game in the Netherlands, as long as they do it in English, or, you know, really anywhere else in the country, places that I might never have traveled to. I think there's a lot of work to get those games really dialed in, to Cara's earlier point about you need to have, like, the digital aspects need to be at the heart of it as opposed to a secondary thought. But as they do get dialed in, I think there's some, like, really exciting things that are going to continue, because it's going to be a lot cheaper and easier, of course, to get together with your friends at night at your house rather than fly wherever.
Well, I think also the idea of timed events that are live, that are shared, you know, the ability to see a performance from far away was something that was never seen as tenable. And mainly it's because the production value, and no one's really invested in remote performance. But I've seen a couple of magic shows that have been remote, one in Europe and one in the Bay Area. And it's interesting because it's not quite there, but it's getting there. And especially if magicians or people who are performers can work on a show that's usually live, they can be much more intimate, closer to the camera, and even begin to work on effects that utilize the digital trickery of a camera and play with the audience as camera rather than audience in person. So I think as long as performers begin using this opportunity to begin iterating and begin testing and figuring out the right way to make this work, I could absolutely see that becoming a thing where it's more than just a YouTube stream, but a decent production quality that makes you feel for half an hour you can see a performer around the world that you may not have ever had the chance to see, like you said, which is kind of cool.
And so
I think this is
No, you go first.
just such a great time for iterating, because everyone is stuck at home and looking for things to do. So I know we've had the experience with everything that we've been playtesting that, you know, we always send out an email and say we're looking to playtest. We've gotten so many responses and everyone's available. It's like, when do you want to do it? Tonight, tomorrow night, the next night? I'm here. I'm free. So it's been, I think it's a really fantastic time to start going.
Sorry, I think we had a little bit of a technical difficulty there. I didn't catch the very tail end of that, but I got the gist of it. And I do want to say, I'm really excited for all of the world to go back to normal so I can go back to canceling plans.
I'm curious, when the world does go back to normal, whatever we think that normal will look like, what practices or what habits do you guys think will continue from what we're doing now? So for example, on the escape room boards, I've seen talk that, you know, America has forever and, you know, mostly and annoyingly been public rooms at escape rooms. And now, you know, maybe everyone will go private. I think there's interesting, or that, you know, what Juliana was saying earlier, more people might be getting together on Zoom on a more regular basis. So what habits and practices do you think are going to happen in gaming, or that are happening in gaming now, that will become kind of the new normal? And Giz, why don't we start with you? Because I'm really interested what conversations are happening around your video games with that.
Yeah, so I think, give that a sec. So I think we don't know. I think we don't know. I think we're getting prepared and we're trying to make sure that we can react quickly to what how things change. I think again, a lot of like asynchronous stuff I think might be happening. I think smaller groups might feel like they're more comfortable. Those are the two things that we're kind of preparing for, and then so more asynchronous social, and then the play at home stuff has been really well received. And I don't know, we've kind of designed the play at home stuff in a way where we can kind of dial it back or dial it, not fundamentally change the games that we're making with it, but some of that play at home stuff might be here to stay. As far as that, as a fan though of a lot of the stuff that you guys make, I think the real impact is going to be the large group stuff. I think that the larger experiences are potentially going to be affected, whereas I think people at first are going to be more comfortable with the more smaller group experiences.
Who wants to go now? Who has a thought on this?
I'll go. I've always got a thought on something. This is something I think Noah and I spoke to a while back on a podcast, which is like, what are people's comfort levels going to be once we start kind of reemerging? And that's gonna speak to how people need to go about approaching their audience flow. So if it's an escape room or an immersive show, I think step one is going to be setting protocols that make your customers or your clients or your guests or your patrons feel safe. So it's just going to be a matter of messaging that out in a way that people feel like you have put a lot of thought into it, from sanitization to distancing protocols. I don't know what that's exactly going to look like, and I'm sure that a lot of people are thinking about that right now. So I'd say just start getting your plans in place now, so that when we are able to kind of start taking baby steps back into engaging in public, that we're doing it safely.
I think it'll be really interesting to see how people work those limitations into their narratives and their stories. When you know that you need to create something where it will be ideal if there's 6 feet of distance, or if there's a window between the performers and the audience, how do you create a story that justifies that? And how do you use that as an inspiration and jumping off point to make something that feels not like, oh, we had to make this with social distancing, but there's, a wall between you and the actors, or something that feels really natural to the story. And I'm excited to see what people create.
I think you're going to see gloves and masks also become a lot more ubiquitous in experiences, just there as options. Until a vaccine is out, I think social distancing and then also gloves and masks are going to become common for staff and for guests. And especially just for the sake of being cautious. I think it's hard with immersive interactive work unless that distance is built in. It's hard to, when you're in an escape room or a space where the environment is tactile, and you're picking up objects and manipulating things, it's impossible to clean every single surface. And so I think the reality of, either you don't open or you find ways to adjust, I think gloves and masks being sort of a commonplace thing is going to be the new normal for a while until vaccine and everything sort of tapers off.
Yeah, that's kind of the hardest thing right now, is like the unknown parts of the medical picture, right? This is why, even if you might want to put your head in the sand and just like wait for this all to pass over, I've been tracking, okay, well, how is that antiviral trial going? And, what are the practices? Like, there's an article sitting on my phone that's like, oh, what can Broadway theaters learn from, practices in South Korea for like how they've been handling their theaters? And for location-based experiences and location-based entertainment, right? There's other industries that have a high touch customer service element that we're going to be looking at. Restaurants, movie theaters, gyms, barbershops, nail salons, right? Any place where you've got that kind of like high level of touch. With gaming as a whole, and even with gaming that has, a human element to it, has performers in it, there's a lot wider tool set, right? So I think what we're more likely to see in this world are people just kind of refocusing the spotlight for a little while. You cannot buy an Oculus Quest right now, right? So like, suckers, you can't, I got mine a long time ago. You can't get one right now. When they go up for sale, they disappear in an hour. And there's a lot of interest, and they're at a sweet spot right now where you have people doing live interactive performance stuff inside VR. You've got things like that escape room in VR that are emerging. What I'm watching what's going to be happening with like gyms and nail salons, and see if that can kind of come back without it causing that second wave. And there's bigger questions around, for this stuff, particularly in location, how many businesses are going to survive? How many people have been able to make good deals with their landlords, and what's that going to do? Will national chains emerge that sort of snap up some of this territory? We're not done with the big structural changes yet, but in terms of our habits, what we can take heart in is the fact that people really want to connect. I mean, Zoom is terrible. Why would we want to do this to ourselves all the time? Because we've got to connect with each other. That's why we endure it so much.
I also just want to throw in there, one of the other things though that I think might be interesting that comes out of this is kind of the pre-game and the post-game. I mean, some of the best immersive experiences I've had have been where it's drawn out and it's really, really the experience starts a day or two before and ends a day or two after. And I think those kind of things might be something where the live portion is a part of it, but it really is more, you're getting a full week-long experience with multiple layers that don't necessarily have to be engaged and have to have this high trafficked social area.
So let's dream for a moment. The vaccine is out. We've gotten to a place where we're pretty much back to whatever this new normal looks like. What do you guys think are going to be the pre-pandemic games that people are just like, okay, I'm there now? And what new gaming experiences do you think that we'll see that came out of this?
I mean, just real quick, I would love if, like what you folks were talking about, I would love to start seeing more live interactive experiences that I can do from home with friends. And that we've been, creators have been forced to make them in this situation, but as a consequence of that, if they get refined and we figure out a pay model and a format for presenting those, I'm totally going to sign up for those, because again, I've now gotten used to them and really gotten hooked on them. And if they just get better and better, I'll be really excited to experience those.
And as a parent, if I don't have to hire a babysitter and I get to go and do an immersive experience or an escape experience without leaving my home, that makes life a lot easier and better. So I think it definitely will hang around.
I could also see the idea of someone working on an asymmetrical experience that is, part remote, part in person, which is able to segue from being entirely remote to having some element of hybrid of remote and physical in person. And I've seen people play with that on a very light scale, but the idea of actually going all in on that as a business model is kind of compelling to me. So I could see more radical experiments in the space coming out as a result.
I think a lot more,
which kind of excites me because I love experiments and seeing how people combine stuff.
I think we're seeing a lot of people are going to discover some of the stuff that's already been going on for years. Like there's, murder mystery, serial boxes where it's like each month you get like an entire, huge thing that's like a big mystery and that's delivered to your home. And then we're going to see people hybridizing that with, an interactive video where, someone calls up. Like I almost want to see, for people who remember the dawn of alternate reality games, there were two alternate reality games that kicked everything off. There was what became known as The Beast, which was the marketing campaign for the movie AI. But then there was another one that also came out, which was called Majestic. And that was something that EA, I think, tried to like sell people, and it involved phone calls and all this sort of stuff. It did not go well because people thought they were actually getting hunted by the CIA. But that's neither here nor there.
Hey, I had Majestic as a kid, and I bought it a month before they canceled the game and took the servers offline. I had to rush to beat it. And there were natural ellipses where you had to wait a day to finish it. I finished it the day before they shut the servers down. So I'm very proud of that.
It was hard to turn off, though. If you're like, okay, I don't want to play anymore, it was like,
no, it was like, you're going to play.
Like the Tiger King?
Huh?
Just hard to turn off.
Also hard to, yeah.
Oh,
Can't
no. Like in the max headroom sense of there's no off button. It's illegal. It's like once the game begins, there was, I'll put it this way, there was no safe word.
It's still happening now.
I mean, one could say that UFO information was just dropped by the Pentagon, and that's a very Majestic thing. The point being that there's this 20 years or more of this kind of material is out there, and people are desperate to do something other than just watch Netflix. So I think the big positive impact, I think, is that there's a bunch of people discovering this stuff for the first time, and they're going to find that they like it when it's done well. And what's nice is there's enough of this material that's been around that there are people who know what they're doing. And that stuff is getting picked up and it's getting a lot of exposure. I mean, you know, there was an article in the New York Times about some of the immersive theater stuff, and Vampire Pizza got picked up by Eater. People are hungry for more than Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus.
But I do have to hold out hope, both personally and professionally, that there will be a market for gathering in a space and feeling an immersive experience together. Like, you know, for the sake of Meow Wolf, for the sake of all themed entertainment, Disneyland, I have to hold out hope that in this perfect world scenario that we're envisioning, with a vaccine, with safety measures in place, that people will eventually feel comfortable enough to kind of take those steps again. Because there's nothing like sitting in a movie theater with people watching a movie, and there's nothing like going to an amusement park or an art gallery or an immersive experience.
I keep reminding everybody that the problem we're having now is more the other. Is, you know, look at the photos of everyone at the beaches. It's like keeping everyone apart for a little while. Like, so that demand's there. People want, I mean, remember, before Disneyland was shut down, people were like, well, they're going to close the park any day now, so we better go. And so the park got mobbed, right? So that the demand is still there. I think the harder thing, and I think the thing that like places like Disney and places like Meow Wolf are weighing, is how do we bring things back in a way that isn't just safe because the government told us it was safe, but safe and that will not wound the brand in the long run, because you don't want the story to be, well, you know, a bus full of kids came through and everyone got sick, right? Like, you don't want a measles outbreak situation.
Yeah, I think human nature hasn't changed much in several thousand years. People are going to crave this. They're still going to. And I think, as pointed out, they still crave it even when they shouldn't, or should be, you know, smart to stay back. And there's a speakeasy CrossFit gym in my neighborhood where people are secretly working out inside of a garage. It's very strange. And the idea that we have people wanting to adhere to their gains and these social workout things as opposed to staying at home, I think speaks to the fact that, yeah, if companies don't find a way to protect themselves and their guests from each other, it can be a problem. So I think, I don't know what those look like, but I think, as Noah said, there's a lot of industries to turn to, but I think it's going to be a lot of very careful experimentation about letting small groups of people in and finding what works. And that's the things we don't quite know, because I think people will show up. And I think that will just increase over time.
Tommy, if it's a speakeasy, what's the password?
I also think that there's I mean, it's also the type of the kind of people you're going to attract, right? I mean, the people that are drawn to these kind of experiences tend to be the more adventurous type, tend to be the more that are eager for this kind of thing. And there is kind of, I think, also a little bit of watching the beaches, there's a little bit of like a crowd acceptance where it's like, well, if it's okay for these other 1,000 people, it's probably okay for me. So I think that we absolutely, everything that you're saying has to be done, and we have to make sure to be safe. But I think that there's going to be, I think it might go back to normal fairly quickly once there's this kind of acceptance of, oh, I did an experience and I was okay and no one got sick.
Yeah, I think the demand is going to be higher, frankly, than it's ever been.
I think the hard part is economic. I think the biggest thing is that the most traumatic aspect, not to make light of anyone who's gone through this, illness and suffered from it as a result, but I think the hardship that most people are feeling is economic. And so the big question is, when will people be able to actually afford to go out? And on the other end, to survive, you're looking at like a Broadway theater or a movie theater operating at what, a quarter capacity, a half capacity. So ticket prices are going to be in flux. The idea of people love it in immersive interactive when audience sizes are small. Well, they're going to have to be. So the question, I think, is just a matter of economics. What are people able to actually afford? What are people going to charge? And back to the point, I think it's going to emphasize the at-home experience that lets people still gather in where everyone chips in for one experience they could do as a group versus one's in person at actual facility.
A smartly structured, intimate, immersive, or interactive experience will have an advantage over a 500-seat Broadway house, just because of that low throughput's going to, and that may change some of the dynamics, overall. Yeah.
You already have to wear a mask in Sleep No More.
So thinking about, I think this, hopefully lots of people watching this, but I'm sure there are people watching this who are working on creating, who were working on creating before this pandemic, and who are using this time to iterate and dream. What should they be thinking about as they're coming up with their everything from tabletop games to video games to immersive and escape room type gaming? What should they be thinking about incorporating so that when this, when we get back to normal, they're at the forefront of the industry?
Format. The thing that they're creating has to justify being in the format they're within, and they have to understand the strengths and weaknesses. That alone is going to be the biggest drive. Right now we're seeing, a lot of people experimenting by taking something that belongs in one format and trying to put it in another without considering the actual strengths of that format. So I would say spend the time to research and figure out what can you do in a tabletop game that is more rewarding and exciting that you can't do elsewhere and in any other format you're creating. Because the circumstances now don't change the fact that a well-curated and well-designed experience for whatever medium or format you're working in will feel special regardless of what's happening outside.
Think in terms of recipes for interaction, recipes for play, right? What is Dungeons and Dragons? It's a cookbook. It's a cookbook for interactive, collaborative experiences. And they've made a lot of money selling that cookbook and then selling other flavors into that cookbook, right? This is what you're doing when you are creating. You're coming up with those recipes. You're coming up with those formulas that then your players, your participants, they act it out, right? If you know that that's what you're doing, you're a step ahead of the game.
And I think also think a lot about what it is that you're craving and that what you're missing at this moment, and how can you incorporate that in a way that is safe and able to happen no matter what the circumstances, but allow those moments of connection and achievement and adventure and magic that I think everyone stuck at home right now is really looking for. People will always look for those things. So if you create something that delivers that, it'll have a life now, it'll have a life after.
And I will say, somebody on social media had done some joke about every interpretive dance after this is going to be all about pandemic and wearing a mask and taking it off. And let's not lean too heavily into that. Let's try and remember that adventure exists beyond this pandemic and that there are other stories to tell. And let's get creative and take our guests and take ourselves on a series of wondrous adventures that aren't necessarily triggering.
Yeah, I want to escape from this moment so much. And when I'm in an experience and someone's like asking, "Well, how are you doing? How's it holding up?" or making me think about anything heavy, I'm just please just make me laugh. Or I'm just going to go back and watch some more DuckTales because that's the only thing that's bringing me joy.
Yes, escapism. Let us escape.
I think, Juliana, to speak really to your point, there's something really magical about and almost paradoxical and contradictory to the idea of using yourself as a benchmark. Because if you try to make something that you think was universal, for some reason, the more you try to appeal to everyone, the less it appeals because it's so generalized. Using yourself as a benchmark for what you're craving is so interesting because as a human, you may think you're alone and you have weird quirks and you're interested in something, but oftentimes that voice and specificity can be more universal than something that's just generalized. And so absolutely thinking about what it is you're missing in your response to it, I think can actually generate really interesting things, because if you're doing just a generalized pandemic response, everyone has been more or less the same scenario. And the idea of being able to do a response to it and what you're specifically missing, I think could be much more compelling.
Okay, so we have just about 5 more minutes. Is there anything that any of you want to speak about or ask the other panels? I'm throwing it to you now. What, as we're looking at non-traditional gaming, both in this space and after, and what people should think about if they're creating, what would you like to say?
I'd like to say that I would like to do an escape room with all of you, because I bet that would be a real good time.
I agree. Although I think we might be out with the level of experience in this crew in like 5 minutes. I wouldn't see any puzzles. I'd just be like, oh, you solved everything? Okay, cool. Good job, team.
I'm looking forward to the here community and meeting, hanging out with all of you next year. That's
for sure.
Oh yeah, we'll bring the gang together. We'll find small ways to bring the gang together before even that.
Yeah, I mean, just one last thing in closing. I think that I'm really inspired by what you were all saying about kind of the exposure to new audience that new audiences have found to this medium through this and have been forced to that. And so I would love to see more participation after this is over from people that maybe were a little intimidated by it, or by, a little cautious, or it seemed a little too out of their comfort zone, that may be, wanting to jump back into life and take on these new adventures. So I'm excited for potentially new people that haven't experienced this medium.
Absolutely. And I think one of the great things about all of the virtual things that are coming out now is that the price points are, on the whole, quite a bit lower than what they would be for an in-person experience. And so I think it really opens the door to a lot of a much broader audience than what was there before.
I'm looking forward to being surprised. I love discovering how people are iterating and coming up with new stuff. I love experimenting with formats and experimenting, and that does not take much. And I'm really excited to see with the rapid iteration of what people come up with. And I'm also really grateful for the people in this community, the chance I've had to see all of you sort of do amazing, interesting work in response to this, and the fact that, realizing how lucky I am to be surrounded by such incredibly talented, but also genuinely kind people. It's something I didn't really experience in my previous life in the film industry. So it's something that this community, I feel very special to be connected to, and this experience has just made me more grateful for those connections.
Yeah, big ups to that. Yes, 100p.
I think we'll wrap up, but on that note, we should call out, or Noah, can you talk about the Leia Fund for a minute? Because I think that is worth mentioning for anybody who wants to see more awesome gaming after this.
Yeah, well, if you're part of the WonderCon community, then you are here in the Southern California area, so it's appropriate to you. Apologies, one of our birds is overhead. I think you know what I mean. So if you hear a sound, I did it, and they're coming for me. So let me get this out. If you go to GoFundMe, you will find and search for Leia Relief, Leia, like Princess Leia. There is a fund we've put together for immersive and experiential artists here in Los Angeles. The idea is that we're taking money in and putting money right back out. We've got little micro grants up to $250 per person for the people who've been making work in LA, to help them if they wind up with like an emergency, a gap, or whatnot. This is something that we were probably going to do at one point down the line. We have an industry group called the League of Experiential and Immersive Artists. And we've just sort of, our hand got forced a little faster than we were expecting to. we've taken a little more of, a tax risk doing this, but it was really important to us. And one of the things that was lovely was that Vampire.Pizza made a contribution to that fund. So a $1,500 contribution, and that is being cycled out as micro grants. And this is something we're going to keep on doing going forward. So if people have the ability to put money in, that's great. Or look for projects. If there are people who are making projects who want to like do like throw a little of the proceeds this way, that's also fantastic. We're definitely game for that. And if you meet the criteria, if you're someone who's been making this kind of work and you're in trouble, don't hesitate to fill out the form and reach out, because the important thing is that we're all taking care of each other.
And I'm excited to meet all your dogs in person.
And on that note, thank you guys so much for taking the time to talk to the WonderCon community today. And hello puppy. Well, now I'm just gonna be distracted. I have cats, but if I pick them up, they'll scratch me, and no one wants to see that. Thank you for coming. Thank you for talking. I learned a lot. I hope everyone who listened did as well. So thank you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you being on
We
the
just
panel.
clap. Oh, we're all getting our pets.
Oh, we gotta do it all together then. All right.
My baby Yoda's in the other room, so excuse
The
me.
WonderCon
the
community.
child.
No.
Sorry,
I
Poos.
feel like this is like the end of later, and we're like next year in Jerusalem, but next year in
Yeah.
Aspen.
Yep.
There you go.
My dog refuses. She's like, no.
I don't want to be on camera.
My dog is very sick of being on Zoom.
My cat is being really cute and asleep. So
Aw.
I'm gonna leave it over there.
It's kind of you not to disturb it.
Well, until the next one.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thanks for
It was
putting
great
Thank
being
you
on
all.
this with you.
Fun.